Hey guys, it's your girl Eda. Aside from being the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast host, I am a legal consultant, author, and advocate for change within the legal industry. Every episode, we dive deep into the tools, strategies, and real world insights you need to succeed, featuring inspiring guests and topics that matter most to the modern legal profession. So, if you find value in these conversations, be sure to subscribe to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast and download our episodes for your commute, coffee break, or brainstorming session. And if you know someone who could benefit, don't forget to send them our way. Referrals are always welcome. Let's create a stronger, more empowered legal industry together. In this episode, I get to speak with Kip Bilderback, a seasoned attorney turned consultant who helps law firms embrace sound business practices to build their dream firms. We'll be talking about creating effective processes, fostering productivity, and navigating the business side of law. Get ready for some valuable insights that can transform your practice. Listen in for more. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. Today, I have Kip. We had an amazing conversation, which I wish we could have recorded because there were so many good nuggets there. But we're going to try and replicate that conversation for you and bring you the best of the best, cream of the crop in this recording. So without further ado, Kip, welcome to the show. Thank you for, accepting our invitation. It's was a long road to get here today, but here we are. We made it through hurricanes, sickness, and everything. But before we get into this amazing topic that I love because we do this as well at Eda Rosa LLC, let's start talking about you as the person, because I really like my audience to know you as the person first. And that way they get to know you, they establish a relationship with you, and the conversation can go a lot better and a lot more active for our listeners. So without further ado, Kip, go ahead.
Well, hello, Eda. Thank you for having me. I know it's been a long road here, and I'm so glad we finally had the time today. And I enjoyed chatting beforehand, and we'll do our best to get it onto the recording. My name is Kip Bilderback. I have a consulting firm, Bilderback Business Advisors. How I got there is pretty straightforward. I went through undergraduate school as a theater major. Came out with very little job prospects. Meanwhile, my wife went to law school, and I looked at what she was doing and said, this looks interesting. And I took a chance, enrolled at St. Louis University School of Law, found that I really loved everything I was learning, was particularly attracted to real estate law, got my law degree, and started with my firm as a law clerk in my second year of law school. And at the time, the law firm was 3 attorneys, about 2 or 3 support people. And over time, I grew with the law firm. We went from that start, streamlined our practice, and at the height, we're about 122 people practicing in the area of mortgage law. It was myself, my partner Vern Singer, my partner Cynthia Kern-Wolverton, over the years, and had a great time, learned so much in growing that law firm. And about 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to spend more time with my family, more time in Florida. And I decided to take an exit. I became of counsel. And now I am taking the skills I've learned over that 30-year period and helping other law firms who are going through that process of growth to maybe not hit the roadblocks or the stumbling blocks that I hit along the way. And it's a ton of fun, and it allows me to spend time speaking with people like yourself. So this is such a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all that. And that is not such a straightforward journey, even though for us it seems like it, but when we live it, it's a lot different. And I'm sure there was a lot of things that happened in between there that we're not going to discuss on the podcast, but not because it's not relevant, but for lack of, time, because we have very minimal time. But anyways, what I wanted to talk about, something very interesting that you said, and it really resonated with not only me, but kind of like our mission at Eda Rosa LLC was utilizing our team members, not for their skills or educational backgrounds or experience. Well, yeah, experience does come into play, but you said something and I wrote it down is like, I'm not hiring you or I'm not paying you to do a spreadsheet or a document or file or no, I am paying you for what's in between your ears. And for me, that was a very impactful moment throughout that entire conversation because it's something that a lot of attorneys miss the mark on. They hire what I call a to-doer, and all they do is check off things all day and wonder why nothing is getting done effectively and efficiently because it could be many reasons, right? And we'll talk about this throughout the podcast, but it could be lack of processes, lack of training. There's a lot of bottlenecks that happen with the business side. And after that, I want you to talk about what that means, right? Because as an attorney, you guys look at it a lot different than a support staff member. So understanding that there's always going to be that gap between the paralegal and the attorney, support staff and the business owners is really imperative for the audience to understand that there's always multiple ways to look at the same situation. But first, I want to talk about the between the ears. So talk about that because that was very cool.
Sure. So I'm sure we'll talk about it as we go along, but over the course of time, we found that one of the really effective ways to manage and grow our practice was through process. We were fortunate enough to develop a proprietary case management system in-house, but there are so many case management systems out there that you can utilize off the shelf. And we worked to get to a point on the matters that we handled where we would have a process in place. We would have data that we would collect. We would have documents that were uniform to the extent possible, but also able to be customized to the situation, and an ability to measure the time frames, the quality, et cetera. So in doing so, we were able to effectively utilize our support personnel, our legal assistants, our paralegals in that process. Now, one of the things we found is as we got much better with process, it got much easier to work the process. You would enter data into the system. You would generate documents. We would measure, the number of documents we were able to produce, the amount of time. And what I found was sometimes the paralegals would go, okay, I'm checking these boxes. And we would have our team meetings and we would talk about that. And one of the things I would tell them is, hey, if I needed to get data into a system or I needed to have documents generated and that's all I wanted, I could probably use technology for that. What I need from you, what I am paying you for is not your ability to type, not your ability to tab, but what's between your ears. I want you to discern. You see the data going in. You see the documents being put out. You understand that process, and you have the ability to identify things that are maybe off track or different or interesting. And I want you to identify those, and I want you to bring those to the attorney you're reporting to, your team lead, so that we can effectively deal with that because that's your value. And in that mindset, the folks really could come up with stuff. I loved it when someone would come into my office and go, Kip, I was doing X and I found this. What do you think? Because they would catch it, we would be able to deal with it. I would have an opportunity to explain why and how we deal with it. And as people would develop over time, they might come into my office and go, Kip, I saw this. I think we should do X, Y, and Z. Is that okay? Yes, absolutely. And in doing so, you increase the quality of the representation. You actually increase the ability to process effectively. And I believe you give a higher level of job satisfaction to the support personnel because they get to think, they get to participate, and they get recognized for what they do. And so I really believe in any environment that having the ability to train folks, give them the ability to utilize their training and give them, proper recognition is so important. And I'll take that further because I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about process, but we had gotten to a point where we had data we were collecting, we had documents we were doing, we had processes that we were timing. And we'd have to review that. There'd be a change in the law. We might want to do something more effectively. And we would sit down and say, hey, let's look at this. Let's look at this process. And when we did that, we would bring the paralegals, the legal assistants into the room and say, hey, look, this is what we're looking at. We need your input. One of the greatest things I recall is that because we had a proprietary system, we designed how you tabbed from field to field. And we came in, I hadn't thought about it. I'm not in doing this. And we sat down and said, hey, we're looking at this process. What are you noticing? And I had one and several paralegals who agreed. They said, hey, I'm putting data in and it goes from here to here to here to here. That doesn't work for me. I needed to go from here to here to here, to here to here to here, here to here to here. And that's going to make it easier because I am taking data and putting it in. And so our IT team said, oh, I can do that. And they fixed it. Well, if you think about that, that made the life easier for the people processing. It made them less likely to make mistakes. And in fact, it scaled down the amount of time they had to spend in doing that task, which ultimately gave them more time to concentrate on quality, or the ability maybe to do a little bit more in a day that could result in more production. And I do want to keep in mind, I went to law school. I love the craft and the practice of law. But the reality is, in order to practice law, you have to get paid. So in order to practice law, you either have to be somewhere where someone is running the business, or you're in the public sector, or you have to be responsible for that business. Because if you're not making a profit, you're not paying your paralegals, all those families who pay their mortgage based on what they're able to earn, and you're certainly not paying yourself. So the practice of law is wonderful, but the practice of law is in fact the business, with the craft of law being the service.
I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode so far, as this podcast is just the beginning. At Eda Rosa LLC, we specialize in helping law firms and legal teams thrive with tailored staff training, operations management, and team building solutions. Whether you're looking to streamline your practice or elevate your team's potential, we're here to help. So visit www.edarosallc.com. That's www.edarosallc.com. Absolutely. And I guess let's continue on that train, right? Let's go to the next stop, which is profit, right? A lot of law firms, owners, I know this is a hurdle that we go through when we are, in the middle of a consultation. They don't want to talk about numbers. They don't want to talk about the data. They don't want to talk about the bottlenecks because they don't want to look at the process. They don't want to look at their inefficiencies, but they just want to complain about it, which is fine. It's from what I'm gathering, it's the American way at this point. So understanding that hurdle and understanding that this is a conflict that I go through day in and day out with my clients, we have to, right? We have to run these numbers. We have to run the data. We have to capture the data accurately. We always know that there's about a 4 to 40, depending on how bad your data intake is, percent a chance of error, right? And we get that. We understand that the data is not everything, which is what you were saying, is bringing in the team, understanding what's happening, having those strategy meetings. Those are all important in order to create and cultivate this relationship that you have. Your team is the success of your law firm, right? It's what ultimately is going to elevate, scale, and progress the business side. So understanding all of that is going to be important. So let's talk about numbers. Let's talk about data. Let's talk about, let's say, let's go anywhere from the CRM, right, to maybe old school paper files, which I cringe, but they exist.
And this is really quite important for me because I think a lot of times when you sit down and say, okay, I do want to look at this, you look at where you are and you look at where you want to be, and it's just overwhelming to see getting there. And I find so many people who go, I want to go from here to here right away. I don't want to have to spend any time. I don't want to have to spend any money, et cetera, and so on. And I look at that and I always think about the saying, what's the best way to eat an elephant? It's one piece at a time.
Absolutely.
And so I always encourage people, wherever you are, if you are at paper files, start there. If you are at a basic case management system, start there. If you are at paper bookkeeping, start there. Take one thing, one piece of your practice, your profit, and take a look at it. Write down what you do. So let's talk about something I see commonly being having a lack of uniformity, a lack of purpose, client intake and engagement letters. How do you do that? What information are you getting down? How are you capturing that? Is there a form on your website? Is there a checklist that you fill out with your potential client, et cetera? Then once you decide to work with them, what's your engagement letter look like? If you have 2 attorneys, do you use 2 completely separate engagement letters? If so, why? If you have 10 attorneys, do you have 5 engagement letters? And when you look at that, why do you do that? Can you go to one engagement letter with maybe some subparts, et cetera, and so on? How are those generated? How do you send them to you? How are you tracking how to get those back? Just that one piece you can refine, and you can refine it in an electronic fashion. You can refine it simply as a paper fashion. You make a file, you have a checklist on one end, you have a letter that's generated in your word processor on the other end, but it's the same thing. When you get to that point, you can then look at who's doing it. So looking to maximize your use of your non-licensed professionals, your paralegals, your legal assistants. If you have something that's one form or one form with subparts, you can then train the folks who are working on it to do that. And whether that's one person, or here's a great idea, 3 or 4 people who can do it, because you know what? Employees leave, get sick, have days off, because we want people to have vacation. And if you have person A working on it and they're the only one who knows, you're stuck. But if you have person A and person B can help them, that's great. And if you have written down how you do it, if you know where those documents are stored, you can do it more effectively. From there, you take that one little piece. Don't worry about anything else. It's okay. Just that one piece. Be done with it. Then when you have time, the next piece. Let's take a little litigation file, just a basic litigation. What are the steps? What are we using? What's our petition look like? What's our discovery look like? How are we managing trial dates, et cetera? How are we gathering information? Take that piece. And then you can also apply it to the business end. What's our hiring process? What's our onboarding process? What's our accounting process? Are we using QuickBooks? Are we using an outsourcer? If you start looking at that, if you document all of it, even if it's not perfect at the outset, and even if it's not fully taken care of, you're building blocks that you can then apply elsewhere. The other thing is I get the people I get are, hey, Kip, I'm a firm with X number of people and it's time to scale. How do I scale my business? And they want to go from here to here, 1,000,000 miles an hour right away. What's the secret sauce? And I have to slow them down. I ask 2 things. One, what does scaling look like for you? Are you looking at case volume? Are you looking at profitability? Are you looking at having a mission to serve a certain segment of society very, very well? Define that. Whole nother conversation. Happy to have that with you or anyone else. But once you have that figured out, you have to start. And when you take the time to set up how you do things, to document that, and I don't care if it's on a yellow sheet of paper or on a Word document or anything else, that's a building block. And when you go from 10 of something to 100 of something, that same building block applies. And as you learn to change things, you can add, subtract, make it better, refine. But you start here, and that carries all the way through. So I had processes that we started 15, 20 years ago documenting. That same document is in use, but the version 15 from version 1, completely different. I will tell you also, save version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because at some point at 15, you might want to go back and look at it, because another item I'll throw in is the question, why? The question I always have to have is, why do we do that? And the worst answer I ever hear in any organization at all, why do you do that? Well, that's the way we've always done it. And if you, okay, that's a red flag. So you need to
That's
tell me
my
why
favorite.
exactly you do that. And we need to know, and is that still relevant today? But having that history, having that written down, you can then analyze it. So start
Absolutely.
small, start where you can, and grow from there. I will
Yeah.
tell you the effect of that is you learn ways, and I'm good friend with John Scott at Anders, and he talks about this often. Is that part of the profitability for a law firm is being able to push down work? That's to
Mm.
get people who are junior associates, paralegals, legal assistants to carry more responsibility while still properly supervising their work, because those folks generate profit for you as well. So if you have a process and a document that, say you had an attorney with 5 years of experience doing, if you can get it so a first-year attorney can do it, great. If you can get it so a paralegal or a legal assistant can do it, that's phenomenal. And if you have the process and the checks, you can make sure that quality is not just as good as it should be, but world class compared to your competitors.
Absolutely. Streamlining, utilizing your tools. This is everything, it hits home with everything, right? And ultimately, it also leads to client satisfaction, which is what we're here for. We are community builders, we service our communities, whether it's a specific niche community, whether it's your entire community. Obviously, it's very dependent on the law firm and the law practice. But understanding that ultimately your support staff is your customer service, right? So if they're happy, if they are provided with the tools and the training and the processes and everything that needs to be done in order to run effectively and efficiently, they'll be able to have more time to provide your clients and your customers that much needed, tailored one-on-one attention, because that is the only thing like at the end of the day that is going to set you apart from the rest of the law firms that are in your niche, in your community, or whoever you consider and so-called competitor. And so that actually leads me to our last part of this conversation, which I'm so sad because I could talk about this all day, but it's about really cultivating and giving that satisfaction to our team. We're so focused on running the business, getting the legal strategies in, finding the right case law and getting the right policies and statutes and all this stuff that comes in with running a law firm and practicing as an attorney, that we forget our dream builders, right? We forget those team members that we have handpicked or not, depending on your hiring process. But personally, I know how hard it is now because I recently onboarded my official employee and that was excruciating, but I did it. Anyway, understanding that, hey, great job. You did a wonderful, this is amazing. Maybe next time we can do this, whatever the case may be, but giving them that satisfaction, that appreciation. It doesn't necessarily have to ultimately equate to validation, but for them, it will translate that way. It would be like, I am doing good, because they need that feedback, right? They need to know what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right. But if you continuously say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and you're not saying, hey, you did this amazing, but maybe next time we should do it differently, right? Understanding that, really making sure that you lessen your turnover because it's expensive to onboard and offboard employees, and understanding that your superhero or your super paralegal or your superstar is already probably within your grasp in your law firm. You're just not providing them with the correct tools, process, or training. Talk about that. Let's talk about how we can release that disconnect and embrace the validation, I guess, effect. I don't know what to call it.
It's a great question, and I've got two approaches. One, you're right. In your law office, you may already have your superheroes. We were talking earlier, when I first started practicing law, I come in as a newbie lawyer. There was a paralegal who worked for us. Her name is Jen, and I kind of reported to Jen. Jen knew everything, and I was fortunate enough to shut up and listen, let Jen abuse me a little bit, but she taught me everything that she knew. And over the next 30 years, we worked together, and she would come into my office, a valuable part of the team, and sometimes give me grief. She'd go, yeah, you're my boss, but remember where you came from. And I think having a little bit taking away from your ego and really allowing the folks in your office who do have knowledge, who do have expertise, to be valued for that is very, very important, because the key word to me is ownership. They own that process. I would suggest you go back to thinking about when you became an attorney and how excited you were to be working in the law. That's true for paralegals and legal assistants as well. They could go work at a credit card company or another business and do some of the same stuff, make similar money. But I think a lot of people gravitate towards law offices because they're interested in representing people, helping people, having interesting topics. So I do think that there is a level of care that you may not see. And if you're hiring correctly, you're going to hire for that. The next thing, as we discussed, is having the processes in place to give those folks as much autonomy as you can while properly managing them to the ethical standards that we have as lawyers. What I found with that is a greater level of job satisfaction. They know why they're doing something. Why do we do this document? They know the information, and they start to see and have fun developing the skill set to identify the things you'd like to have identified, and hopefully over time help you better to understand things. Certainly participate in the process, participate in the growth, participate in the process change. And then last but not least, measuring and recognizing that, to say, oh, great catch. Oh, look what's going on. To celebrate things that occur in the office. Hey, we did really well on this client file, or we did really well this month because we did, whatever it was, we did a bunch of it without exception, without issue. And making sure the people who do that understand the value that they bring so that they take ownership of the work. Their communications with clients will improve, because they will know that the client is the one that they are serving and they're proud of what they've done. And in general, they'll try to help each other. And that may be the other thing, going off track a little bit, is the fact that no one has sole ownership of anything, that we're all here to help each other. So that if you have 5 paralegals and someone's sick or someone goes on vacation and other people do that work, you celebrate that. The person who gets to take a vacation goes, wow, really, thank you. But the people who do it, hey, look, we've trained you, you have this process, and this isn't what you did, but you did it for a week and it was really good. Thanks so much. Those things bring a lot to the table that go beyond your pay, your benefits, et cetera. And I really find that helps folks have long-term job satisfaction. They may not be with you forever, but the period of time that they're with you, you hope that they will be happy, productive, and maybe grow to the next thing they do, or stay with you for their entire career, which to me is one of the most wonderful things, to see folks who had been with us for 10, 20, 30 plus years. It's so gratifying. Yeah. And it's about ownership and acknowledgement.
I love that. And to your point, I guess, storytelling is always a great one. So I will give you guys a personal example. As a freelance paralegal, early on in my 7 years of business, I was offering freelance paralegal just to kind of get my foot in the door with attorneys and really show them what as long as they trusted me as a paralegal, then they would probably trust me as a consultant, right? That was my train of thought, and it worked. So here I am. But anyways, and I had this amazing attorney. I've been blessed with, being in the presence and really learning from the best of the best. He's an amazing litigator. We still communicate. We still do projects together. Like, it's just, once you're a client, you're a client forever. Like, it doesn't matter. The buck doesn't stop with our services. And so now we're doing on other things, and I'm working with his firm in a different way, which I appreciate. But anyways, there was this one case I very cared about, and it was actually the inspiration of the book that I'm writing and hopefully will launch next year. Almost done with it. But anyways, it was this one case, it really hit home, and I was very passionate about it, right? And so I became very passionate about the entire caseload at that point, because I realized that he handpicked certain cases that were very special and very unique to the personal injury realm, which for me is very different because the main portion of my paralegal experience is personal injury and real estate. And so I have done anywhere from a small car accident to a massive explosion to, a defect in a building, whatever the case may be. You think about personal injury, I've probably had my hands on it, especially in the state of Florida. And so anyways, I'm working on this case. It was very personalized for me. It was about a little girl around the same age as my daughter, and it just hit home. I started crying. I was an emotional wreck. And come deposition for another case, they provide us with this newfound evidence that we had been requesting for like a month, and they finally give it to us the day before the deposition. How convenient. And so I go in, it was at 8 o'clock at night, and I see it in the Outlook, and I said, oh no, they're not doing this to my attorney, not my attorney. And so I took it personal, right? And so I went in, and it was literally 100-page document, and I was up until probably 1 o'clock digesting it, summarizing it, doing everything I could to make sure that my attorney, by the time he woke up at 9 o'clock and had that deposition at 10:30, was properly prepared to the best of his ability. And so I went in, I did everything. It took me hours, but I did it. I did everything, and I found the golden ticket, right? The aha moment that we're like, oh, this is it, we're gonna win. And so I found it, and I said, this is why they took so long to give it to us, because they knew they were going to lose the case as soon as they gave us this document. And so I went in, I did what I did best. I went into summarize the whole document, did everything I could, but then I snipped it out of there and I said, hey, here you go, we won the case. Because they were negating until finally it's like, well, you can't negate anymore because it's in writing. And so anyways, I sent it to him separately, and I gave him the whole summary, and he's like, wow, you didn't have to do that, like it wasn't. And I was like, I know I didn't have to, but I felt like I needed to. There was a need versus a want, right? I felt like I took it personal because it was me requesting it. I was requesting it, and I was the nagger, and I was the one constantly calling the office. And then they want to give it to us at night, the day before the deposition. And I'm just like, well, why? So then I got curious. I went from anger to personal to curious, like all these emotions came up, and we won. We ended up winning. Like, we didn't even go to deposition because they already knew that it wasn't going to happen. And so we won that case. We got our client what we could, right? Because you can never really repair the damage, but it is what it is. And without going into further detail, but we ultimately won that case because of my 5-hour frenzy. I was going crazy. And so it doesn't matter if you're the attorney or if you're the receptionist or if you're a paralegal. When you take it personal, I'm just letting you know things happen, right? And it's like, we care about our clients. We have that customer service in us, right? Because we are the customer service. So put a little faith. I think that's going to be my end all say all for this episode is put a little faith in your team, because at the end of the day, they're humans too. And they're going to take it just as personal as you are. They're going to get involved just as much, if not more, because they're the ones communicating with them a lot more than the attorney in most cases. And you get to know these families, right? Especially that little girl. I will never forget that case. I still talk to the family because it was just so close to home. And she's doing amazing. I still get teary-eyed, but she's doing amazing. And we've gotten her to the best care, the best, ultimately what she could. And she's doing great, and the family always calls me and thanks me, sends me photos of her new accomplishments and her progression as health-wise. And, it's just, we take it personal too, right? It's our case too. So just give us a little faith, right? Give us that hope and give us the tools and the processes that we need in order to really get that case where we need to go. Because these people are coming to us with these issues, are coming to us at their direst time, probably in most cases, or in a pivotal moment in their life where they don't know what to do. They're confused, they're angry, whatever the case may be. They're either in the defensive or in the proactive, or, depending on where they're at. And so understanding that there's a lot more involved than just practicing law, right? Yes, we do need the case law and we need the statutes and we need the processes and we need this, but add a little emotion in it, right? These are people and these are human lives. We're not the doctors, right, taking care of them, but their lives are quite literally sometimes in our hands, right? If we don't get them the best care, if we don't get them the proper legal especially in criminal law, I see this all the time. You're only as good as your attorney. I mean, goodness sake, for anybody that does criminal, God bless you. Immigration as well, right? Lives are literally in your hands. And so take that, just like anybody else with a shield would, a police officer, firefighter, like we are the frontliners of our community. People are coming to us for a service, and we're providing more than just fancy documents to a court. We are providing a way out. We're providing a resolution. We're providing a guidance to people that don't know anything about law. And so I feel like sometimes we miss the mark on that and we forget what we actually do. We're not only practicing law, we're not only providing all this, we are providing hope to a community that's probably hopeless. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I know I got a little personal, but I think that it was necessary because sometimes we get a little too involved in the professionalism of the podcast, and I have to bring my little Eda out. And so I want you guys to appreciate everything that you do, know that you are heard, know that there's a place for you here on the podcast and on our platform, and know that there are other people like Kip and everybody else that's been on this season has been very handpicked, very special to me. I think probably this is my favorite season so far, and we're only 10 episodes in at this point. So I really appreciate everybody that comes on, especially you, Kip, for taking a really long time with me, because I think we've been talking for over 2 hours. Although they're only going to hear 30 minutes of the conversation, but we've been probably talking for 2 hours at this point. And I appreciate you taking the time and carving it out. And thank you for the conversation. I truly appreciate it. And until justice is served, everybody, I'll be here.
Thank you, Eda.